Good afternoon and welcome to BroadCAST, the webinar interview series of the UNL Center for Academic Success and Transition. I'm your host, Dan Hutt, and we couldn't be more delighted to have with us today from his home in Minneapolis, Minnesota, bassist and vocalist John Munson. John, it's a tremendous honor to have you here with us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was great to get the call.
Well, it's our pleasure. We're very grateful. Now, a couple of items of business before we get started here. I'll say the same thing to you that I said to Dan and Jake, just to be clear about the rock hierarchy according to Hutt. Now, it goes the Beach Boys, the Beatles, and then the third arch of the triumvirate is Trip Shakespeare / Semisonic / Twilight Hours / Matt Wilson, the whole conglomerate that way.
All right. Who's writing this book? I think I might be looking at him.
Okay, very good. Now, one of our early questions for you comes from Kelsey of Gretna. I'll identify my students by their hometowns here in Nebraska, if I may. And she has a question about your early favorite bands growing up. And I know from previous answers and interviews of yours that one of the Trip Shakespeare stock answers to that question was AM radio. And I've heard you talk about growing up as a kid, and you were on the paper route with the Wilson brothers, and at those twilight hours early in the morning when you were most vulnerable, the raspberries are pounding into your brain. Now, I've got a crazy theory here that you're welcome to debunk, but I take that information and then I see the font on the first Twilight Hours album is in newspaper font. Is that a nod back to those childhood days of being on the paper route? Is that a crazy inference, or it's very creative at the least, wouldn't you say?
I think it's creative on your part, for
right.
Sure.
Is it malarkey that has nothing to do with anything?
I know. I would say it has a lot to do with everything. Okay. But these sorts of decisions, I think you're drawing some connections that had not even occurred to me, and I'm loving it. And that's the thing that is amazing about music and about art, is that it's never complete until it lands with a person who's ready to receive and interpret it and make those inferences. I think that's really what it's all about. So, I mean, to get at that question a little bit more, one of the great things about Trip Shakespeare was that we shared a lot of we had many of the same influences, you know what I mean? And that's certainly true with Semisonic also, and most any project I've ever been involved with. You kind of have to have like a common language, and you have to have an understanding of where everybody wants to proceed from, to some extent. Now, in the case of the raspberries in particular, I was familiar with the raspberries and I loved the raspberries, but the raspberries were not the center of my kind of pop universe, except as expressed by AM radio when I was growing up. Because I had an older brother, and to him, something like he was and my older brother is 12 years older than me. So for him, the raspberries would be dismissed at the time as, bubblegum. Which was a term of disparagement, and it was about AM radio disparagement, which was what I had. I had a transistor radio that I could listen to KDWB and hear all that stuff on my AM radio, or even on the radio that was on my dresser. I know that makes me seem like a million years old, but
not at all.
You know what? It was what it was. But my brother, he was into FM radio. And at that time, FM radio was broadcasting, for one thing, in stereo. And it was broadcasting a not staticky, crappy signal. And so you could really hear the songs. And AM and FM radio at that time was really proudly progressive in terms of
Mhm.
their playlist, and they were not playing by the rules that the record companies were establishing for them. And so the playlist was really adventurous and cool. The sound was really cool, and they do stuff like play the whole side of a record
Right.
or a whole record even. And
Right.
so that was kind of the gospel according to Tony Munson, my brother. And he was like, yeah, Raspberries or Grand Funk Railroad or whatever these bands are that you're listening to, what you really need to listen to is Frank Zappa and Captain Beefheart and, you know, David Bowie and
Right.
there's other stuff that he was listening to. And then he went off to college and he left his whole record collection up in his attic room. And I got a turntable and I started going into those things and diving in
Terrific.
a lot of interest. And so, was it Catherine?
Kelsey.
Kelsey, I'm sorry, Kelsey. Yeah, that was that really took me to some interesting places. AM radio for sure, but also my brother, his record collection, and being subject to his rules of like what was cool, you know, as opposed to the ones that you outlined. My brother was
Right.
like a god to me in terms of his music taste, you know.
Wonderful. Well, there are many, many college freshmen here on the University of Nebraska campus that have the Are You Shakespeareans LP by Trip Shakespeare. So we'll want to talk about that.
I
Now,
love it I love it that became required reading for them or whatever. I hope that they really love it.
they do, and it's great symmetry for me because when I was their age, that was the record that changed everything for me. So it's really a nice opportunity for me that way. John, to begin, did you always know that you were college bound? And how did you decide on Chinese studies and going to the U of Minnesota? Many students here want to know about that. Among them, Casey and Sunny of Omaha, Shatha and Danielle of Lincoln, Isabel of North Platte, and Ken of Thailand. And the list goes on and on, but I'll allow you to answer that.
I think that I am probably not a great college guidance counselor.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to preface my remarks by saying that. As far as college went, I come from a family of University of Minnesota attendees, as well as other colleges in the Twin Cities area. And so the expectation was that I would go to college. I would say that I would say I was not ready to go to college when I started college. But I decided to kind of give it a try and see if it could meet my interests in a way that would kind of advance my curiosity. And so I started going to the University of Minnesota music program, and my interest was in electric music, electric bass. I was kind of moving in a direction that at that time a university music program was not catering to a guy like me. If I was going to get educated about recording music and writing songs and learning how to play electric bass and kind of trying to learn more about making sounds for records and things like that, I was going to have to do it free from the strictures of a college music program. And that became like apparent really, really quickly when I went to the University of Minnesota music program. It just wasn't, they weren't interested in the same things I was. And so I lasted about maybe a year, and then I dropped out and started playing in bands around town. Oh my God, I know, it's freaky. I had to find a different path to get back into school. And it didn't have anything to do with music. I'd already found my way with music by the time I went back to college. And I found my way into the Chinese studies program by going to China. It wasn't that long after China had started to be available as a place that you could go. And my dad is an academic, and he was over there to do some research. And I just accompanied him and I loved it. It was so interesting to me. And as soon as I got back, I was like, I want to learn how to speak this language better than this phrase book taught me. And so I started studying Chinese as soon as I got back home. And I finished 4 years of Chinese language study over the course of about a year and a half of like intensive study and going back to China. And that was really my way to get back into college. And so I found a more kind of collegiate path into college.
How long was that gap before you went back?
I don't know. It's probably about 3 or 4 years or so.
Okay.
You know, Trip Shakespeare had just started, literally just started when I went back to do a summer intensive program in Tianjin, and we had recorded our Applehead Man at that time. And so for me, there was some questions like when I was in China, I was like, should I even go back? But I knew that I still had more to do in music. So I did, I came back home, and that's when, you know, the band really took off when that record came out in the Twin Cities.
Right. In retrospect, do you feel like your college education helped you in your music career, even though they were disparate on different topics and whatnot? Do you see any connection that way?
I can't really say. I think that I think that I have a lot of interests, is what I think, and I think that by feeding my curiosity in different ways, it just makes me a happier person. And so I think that makes me a better musician, a better whatever, a better dad, a better husband, a better everything. So I think I was, when I started, when it was 18 and ready to start college, I think I was much more monofocused on music. But I think that's the tendency of the young mind. It's like you have this like intense curiosity, and you just want to have this laser focus on one thing. And you even think like, I can't believe these people who have broader interests, why are they wasting their time? And then you find that all these things kind of like feed back into one another. In fact, when I went back to China, I studied Chinese music at a Chinese music school, and that was like incredibly eye-opening and mind-expanding. It was so great.
I bet it was. We talk about that Renaissance aspect of the university with a liberal arts curriculum, the idea that you're supposed to dip your toe into so many different waters and not just be tunnel focused, as you indicate that way.
All the things feed each other. You know, that's the thing. I stand by that. That was always my mom's belief, and she was a musician and an English teacher, and she had a lot of different interests, and she was a big proponent of liberal arts education. She thought that was just the greatest. And I kind of don't know what people think about it anymore. I don't know. It doesn't matter to me so much. It's like I have kids in college right now, and I just want them to be happy in the world.
Sure.
If that means like greater specialization or being really broad, it doesn't matter to me. I just want them to be happy, however they can be happy.
As long as they find their path.
That's
accordingly.
the main thing.
You bet. John, have you enjoyed support from your friends and family in a music career almost from the beginning? And Heidi of Roca asks, did the lack of security in pursuing a career in music scare you initially?
I actually looked at this question prior to our meeting, and I found it to be kind of intriguing. Here's the thing that I would say. Everything is scary.
Yeah.
If you want to be scared, the world is a scary place, but the world is also an amazing and lovely place. And don't think that, I mean, do the thing that you love, embrace your passion, and at least go down that path as far as you can at some point, to just kind of find out what there is out there for you. Because there's always people preaching the idea that well, you're going to want to have a backup plan, because what if you don't make it in music? It's like, so does that go for everything?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's
Good
like,
question.
it's like stuff can always not work out. Does that mean like you better have a backup plan if you're going to be a clerk at the Quick Trip, because
Right.
you might find that like the fluorescent lighting and the late nights don't agree with you eventually. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
Give me a break. It's like do the thing that feeds your soul and makes you happy, and don't respond to life with fear. Respond to life with love, and you'll probably find a lot more love in your life if you kind of engage with the world in that way.
That's terrific advice. Now, Jake speaks in his book about life prior to being a professional musician, and the need to have to work a series of miserable day jobs.
The thing that's so great about Jake and his like work life like that, I mean, at the time he was working these jobs, and just the stories that he told about it were just hysterically funny to Dan and I. And we
Mhm.
at that time we were poor and just barely making it, you know, as we were getting Semisonic started. But speaking of being fed, Jake's sense of humor fed both Dan and I really richly as he kind of described the things that would happen to him in his work life. You know,
Second to none.
yeah, because he's just so funny. He is
Yes.
so funny. So you've interviewed Jake.
Yes.
Oh God, he's the best. Nobody can hold a candle to him with his stories. He is absolutely the best.
All of our students last year got a copy of Jake's wonderful book that way. So spreading the word that way too. Yeah.
Yeah, he's great. I mean, the thing that's very funny about his book, many musicians, and I mean many musicians who were kind of coming up at that time, who read that book, really resonated with them, because it deals with you know, you're trying to kind of get on this track towards your dream, and like trying to like embrace your star or whatever that is. Meanwhile, like on a regular basis, much more regular than you might ever imagine, there's just like a constant trough of humility to be, you know, kind of spooning over you, you know.
Yes.
It's like it's really interesting. And the thing that's also interesting is that the world that Jake describes largely is gone now. It's like it really is a chronicle of a moment in time of like you know, post-capitalist kind of like insanity in this specific industry. And I think it's a great, at this point, historical document. But in terms of like the way it kind of talks about the emotions of the path of trying to get your music out into the world, I think it's very correct and well worth reading. Well worth reading.
Totally agree. Have you had your share of those miserable day jobs, John, before you became a professional musician?
I didn't probably have quite as many miserable day jobs as some.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I really you know, you ask about how supported I was by my friends
Right,
and family.
right,
That
right.
stuff is really crucial. My wife is an artist also, and she was speaking with a artist that we both admire and really respect. And she was like, what is the advice that you would give to an artist about how to have a successful career? And he was very quick to answer: patronage. You know, patronage from your family, patronage from your friends, support in terms of like the structures of your community, in terms of the newspaper, having like an artistic environment to kind of like engage with. You know, I think that's one of the big advantages for certainly musicians in the Twin Cities. And I think it's true more generally than that too. People in the Twin Cities, music fans, were from, as soon as I could kind of start thinking about having a band out playing original songs in bars, there was an audience there that was like ready to know about the next thing that some Twin Cities musician was going to do that was going to kind of rock the world a little bit. You know what I mean? It started with bands like Husker. I mean, it started before Husker Du, The Replacements, Prince, The Suburbs. Obviously Bob Dylan, who kind of rejected Minnesota a little bit, whatever, but he's from here too.
Yeah.
There was a real environment that you could kind of go into, and an expectation of greatness. That you could actually be great and be from here. I think that's one of the things that holds a lot of people back, is like, whatever happens in Slumpville, nothing good ever came out of Slumpville. It's in the middle of the country and nobody cares about it. It's like, you know what? Don't ever believe it. All you dwellers in Schlumpville, wherever that happens to be, your own private little Schlumpville, you can make what you want wherever you are. I mean, get out there and do the thing that you want to do, and push it in front of your friends. And then if they seem to like it, go see if the Schlumpville down the road, the next college town to the east or whatever, see if they like it there. Just go feed your dream. Whatever it is.
Does that supportive, nurturing environment in the Twin Cities, is that part of what's kept you there over the years as your bandmates have gone east and west in Semisonic?
Well, Matt stayed here.
Right.
And it was always nice to have Matt, who kind of stuck it out. And Dan really stuck it out for a very long time, to be honest. He could easily have gone elsewhere, but I think finally the imperative that he kind of be meeting with songwriters to work on songwriting pushed him into it becomes hard to convince people to come to the Twin Cities starting right about next month. And then it's hard for about another 4 to 5 months.
Right.
And so then you're just like, do you just do it on the phone or whatever? Or then Dan has to go get on a plane, do whatever. So I think for Dan, it became imperative for him to kind of go to Nashville, go to LA, go to New York, go to where the songwriters were, so that he could kind of feed that part of his work. But I think he's really very much a Twin Cityan and a Minnesotan at heart. And I think he really wanted to try and figure out a way to stay here, but it just kind of didn't work out.
Right.
That he could find the things that he needed to continue his career. Jake is not from here, of course. He's from Champaign.
Right.
And so I think he came here. He may have come here to some extent because his good music buddy Dan was here.
Brought him from San Francisco. Yeah,
right, exactly. And so that was maybe somehow written in the stars. That they were going to continue to do stuff together, and so that's maybe why Jake ended up here, and maybe that he's not from here. That's why he left.
Right,
because it can be a little bit of a. It's not the easiest place to live,
John Abbey of Howell, Cindy and Alla of Lincoln, and Hallie of Grand Island all are interested to know what other career path you might have taken if you weren't a professional musician.
Well, I think I could have. I have tried teaching. I love. I mean, I enjoy being with students. I went back. I didn't finish college. Like, I went back to kind of get started on this Chinese degree, but I didn't finish. I didn't end up finishing until like 20 years plus after I started.
Good for you.
So maybe
to finish
that thing that I did anyway. And when I went back, I was like, oh, this is awesome. I love this environment because I love ideas, and I love people who are excited about ideas. And maybe there's no time in your life for like just a normal person, whatever that is. I have no idea what a normal person is really, but that people want to engage with ideas and like figure out their path or figure out how they can, in their most idealistic dream of what they want to be. That's college. And so being in that atmosphere 20 years after I started was like, this is so great.
You were more ready for it.
I could easily imagine having been a college professor. I talked with the guy who kind of helped me finish college about what that might look like. And for me, since my discipline was Chinese studies and Chinese language specifically, I would have had to go in and like just bang away at language studies for probably 5 years to kind of get back to something like ground zero. I did do some stuff at a technical college teaching kind of sound for film classes. I really enjoyed that. But I feel like I can maybe do better in some other ways that are more music adjacent, you know, that don't involve teaching music. Because I don't, the idea of teaching music lessons is not something that I don't enjoy doing that.
Right.
My buddy Chan, I play with a guy named Chan Poling, and he's a really talented pianist, as well as a great songwriter. And it's his birthday today, by the way.
Okay, happy birthday, Chan.
He describes it as when people ask him to you know how he navigates a keyboard and how he plays. He's like, well, you just do it.
Yeah,
you just do it. There's nothing to it, you know. It's just put your hands out there, and you kind of, if one note doesn't sound good, then don't play that one so much. Play it, you know. It's very kind of like got a kind of automatic. You know, I've ever heard the thing of like automatic writing, where people just put the pen on the paper and then they just let whatever happens.
Yeah.
That's a hard thing to teach.
Yes, it is.
In a music realm, you know.
Yes, it is. John, take us back to the time of Are You Shakespeareans? What was your life like at that stage? And what was it like to be a member of Trip Shakespeare, to roll into a new city as a member of Trip Shakespeare?
Well, we really, you know, we kind of, there, in some ways we really kind of violated the a certain aspect of the Twin Cities ethos of never let them see that you care,
right?
You know, that was certainly like the Replacements would like get up, and you know, Paul is a great songwriter. He didn't just like fall out of bed and write those amazing songs he wrote. He worked really hard at it. But I think there was an aspect of his work that was, he didn't want anybody to see that he really gave a crap. You know,
it's supposed to be effortless.
It's supposed to be completely effortless. And I think we were not really like that. Matt was very intent on us just being great. Wanted us to work really hard so that
hence the name.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, he that is right where the name came from, because he wanted it to be on this level, you know, which was like, in a way it was preposterous, but it did give us kind of a thing to kind of gun for. And that came in the level of activity and the songwriting stuff that Matt did. It also came in the degree to which we practiced. We practiced basically for a year before we ever played a show, because Matt was like, we want to come out of the box as something that is like nobody has ever seen before. He had that in mind. And I think it did kind of land and was very surprising when we started playing these shows, because Elaine is playing standing up, and it's got the two brothers harmonizing the fretless.
You playing fretless, yes.
Weird, a little bit weird to hear. And so it was really, you know, I think quite fresh for people here. And we worked really hard on trying to make something that was, you know, great. We wanted it to be great.
Right.
And so when we went around and started playing out of the Twin Cities, we wanted to come in and just kind of take over in a way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that was kind of, that's what it was like. We were like our own little posse, and we were buddies, and we were going to go out and we were going to take over the world, you know.
That sounds so gratifying.
I mean, to the degree that it worked or didn't work or whatever, it was incredibly fun. It was incredibly fun. It was great.
Now, I mentioned in my email to you, Lincoln being, of course, in Nebraska, the kingdom of power pop artist Matthew Sweet, who I know was helpful to Trip Shakespeare in the early days, and you did backing vocals, of course, on his LP Earth. Could you say more about that?
Well, I mean, he was definitely very helpful to us. No one would ever deny it. He learned about us through his friend. Oh my God, now his name is going to escape me. Rick Menck.
Oh,
Rick
yeah,
Menck
drummer.
yeah, right, the drummer.
Now record store clerk in Minneapolis, if I'm not mistaken, in his part-time gig.
Among many other things.
One of the great drummers. Yeah.
So great. So great. I was kind of like dreaming that maybe I would get a chance to ever play with him. And I don't know. We'll see if it ever happens. It would be so cool if it did. But Rick became aware of us. He told Matthew about us. Matthew came and saw us, and he was living out east at the time. And he was signed to
A&M, I think, maybe.
No, I think
or before that.
It was before that. Earth came out on like maybe Sony or I don't even know, whatever. And he told Steve Rabowski about us. And Steve came and saw us and was intrigued. And then after that, we went out and sang on Matthew's Earth record. And that was a really interesting experience. I think it was a little different than what Matthew even really wanted it to be. I don't think we necessarily fulfilled his fantasy of what he thought we would bring to his record, or maybe we did. We didn't get asked to do it again. And he had Leia Kunkel. Right. I mean, she's kind of an amazing background vocalist.
Yes.
Anyway, Matthew had it kind of helped lead us into the world of getting a record deal, because Steve Rabowski was a big deal, and then he moved over, became the head of A&R at A&M, and then we had like probably a half a dozen record people kind of looking really closely at the band and trying to make their bets on whether or not we could be successful. And Matthew Sweet's guy, Steve Rabowski, and Pat Clifford at A&M, they were the first ones to say yes. Okay. And we really liked them because their musical tastes were really closely aligned with ours. Isn't that weird how that goes? The first question that you ask, I mean, it really does come down to that common language and wanting to perpetuate a certain kind of like aspect of the music that you love. He said yes, we said yes, and the rest is a history of sorts.
Terrific. John, I wish you would speak a little about something that you address in the liner notes to Are You Shakespeareanced, and that is the importance of humor in Trip Shakespeare. And I'm very careful not to indicate a jokey kind of humor. That's not what I'm talking about, but humor as parallel to high art, a la Shakespeare himself, a la the Beach Boys' Smile album, the Who's Sell Out. Matt has said in interviews before that when the music gets so sublime, it just makes him want to laugh, and he doesn't know why. Brian Wilson said we're closest to God when we're dying laughing. Humor seems to me to be so imperative to the whole Trip Shakespeare experience.
I think it's very funny. I was listening to that Maggie Rogers Questlove exchange, and they were talking about the artistic impulse. It's like you want the artists who are producing the music that makes you die somehow, and in which you feel like this great empathy. And I think that the sadness and sorrow in your heart when you feel the recognition in a song like that, that's really important because it's very private. You know what I mean? A laugh is best shared, It's fun to sit and read a book and whatever, but it's more fun to sit with a group of people and laugh together somehow.
Sure.
If you got a whole room of people weeping, it's pretty intense.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
and so anyway, I guess I have a lot of views about that. I mean, I love the music that's heartbreaking, and but I mean, some of Trip Shakespeare's, greatest successes were stuff that was really funny. I mean, the Toolmaster Brainerd is just funny. The Slacks is just funny. But the problem is can you have the Slacks or, Toolmaster of Brainerd on the same record that you have
Spirit,
or If You Miss Me,
right?
Or whatever. I think one of the things I really have always loved about Trip Shakespeare is that there was a real arc of all trying to embrace all the different feelings that humans can have, and we can all share together and just do that. But I think a lot of people do not like that. They want to put a record on, they want to have that experience for 30 minutes, 30 minutes or 40 minutes. They just want to just go like, oh, crap. I don't want to hear anything jokey, and they almost mistrust an artist who then presents something that's kind of humorous or funny or goofy. You know what I mean? It's like I want to have a conversation with that goofball, but I don't want him to like break the spell of the freaky sorrow that I'm feeling right now.
Sure.
So I don't know if I have any particular. I don't know if that's any revelations in there, but I do know that
you weren't easy to file in Trip Shakespeare.
No, it was a challenge. I mean, because some of the biggest. We dared to be goofballs, you know what I mean? And there were other bands that were goofy like that too. That that were coming along at that time, but they tended not to be the bands that did the best. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Well, we always loved the Suburbs, because the Suburbs, another Twin Cities band, they had that. They had all these goofy things like Cigarette and Backwards, Tape My Wife to the Ceiling, all these like nutty titles and predicaments that Chan would get himself into, or even their biggest hit, Music for, probably not their biggest hit, maybe Love Is the Law is their biggest hit, but Music for Boys is probably their biggest hit in the Twin Cities, and it's all about going to boys camp. And it's super, very goofy, and we love that stuff. So I think, if you don't like the goofiness of Trip Shakespeare, blame Chan.
Okay, very good. John, by the time of Lulu, the LP Lulu and Trip Shakespeare, you were seemingly handling about a third of the lead vocals at that point. It was like there were 3 lead singers in the group, and you were featured in the Across the Universe LP poster, which has been on my wall for many, many years now. One of the great rock posters.
You and Paul Rudd.
Okay.
Or was it Alicia Silverstone or whatever?
Also liked it. Well, when you got to Semisonic, then you didn't have as big of a lead vocal presence. Certainly, was that?
I think Dan kind of identified some of the things that he, to some extent, things that he viewed as. We wanted to have bigger success. I think that was a thing that we wanted when we started Semisonic. One of the things that, every band that you share your kind of dreams with one another, and sometimes it's embarrassing or goofy or whatever, but you have to like reveal this stuff to somebody. And if you can't reveal it to your bandmates, who are you going to reveal it to?
Yeah.
When we started Semisonic, we were like, let's make singles. Let's figure out let's make a album, or at one time we were going to be just put out singles. We won't put out whole records at all. We're just going to make singles, and it's just going to be like an A side and a B side. That's kind of where we are with music in a weird way now.
Yes, it is.
And it is very AM radio. That's for damn sure. It does kind of follow that track. And I think another thing that kind of came alongside of that was like, let's figure out a way to not be confusing.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Let's figure out a way to do something where audience doesn't have to kind of strain to kind of explain what their affection for this music is. All they have to do is like drop the needle in the groove, and it's like, let's dance.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I think one of the things that's really charming and amazing about Trip Shakespeare, I think, is that Matt wanted to create this kind of panoramic view of like human emotion, I think, to some extent.
Yeah.
And the sadness and the longing and the yearning. I think Dan expresses all those same things too, but I think it's that the intention is slightly different. It's a little bit more directed, because at the root, you want people to know you.
Yes.
And so that means you want people to hear you. And so you want to create pathways so that people actually can do that. You know what I mean? And so if you create obstacles in terms of like their understanding of what it is that you're doing, it's like, this is not the same person singing. This is a different person singing. I don't like this person. Or I like this person. I don't like that person. It's like too many choices. It's just like, I like this band. I like that song. I like the way it makes me feel. I like the way it makes me want to get up and dance. You know what I mean? It's just that's I think what led to that. I love to sing. And one of the things I love about this band, The New Standards, is that not only do I get to sing like my favorite songs, but I get to sing half the night, more or less.
Oh yeah.
And so that's really great. And I'm still eager to find more ways to sing. I know it's probably late in the game at this point, but who knows?
You must find more ways to sing, John. Absolutely.
You're sweet.
Now, speaking of dropping the needle in the groove, I talked with Dan about this. 2020's EP, You're Not Alone by Semisonic, marked, as far as I know, the first venture into vinyl for Semisonic, and it was a good one. I really like how the label of the record doesn't list the tracks. You've got to count the grooves to figure out what side you're on that way, and I just found that tremendous. What a great interactive experience that way. How did that come about?
That was just one of those things. I think Todd Galapo, the art director, probably had everything to do with that. And he had been an art director at MCA, and I'm sure it also gave us another opportunity to showcase the beautiful artwork that was that we used for that record. That Cuban painter, whose work is so beautiful. I can't remember his name right off the top of my head. But it was another kind of a clear view, so you didn't have to have like print kind of over that. The other thing, you know, what bugs me about that record, and I love the fact that we made it and that it's vinyl and everything else. I guess what bugs me about it is that my turntable won't spin up to a full 45 RPMs. It sounds like this sad and sagging kind of it's not 33, but it's not 45.
Oh no.
It's tragic. It's time for a new turntable.
It's time for a new turntable. John, I would have thought that you would have had the finest vintage home hi-fi equipment.
The problem with vintage home hi-fi equipment is that it's as glorious as it is to see the glow of the tubes. It's getting harder to find them, for one thing, and they also the old wiring and everything. It's just like they're very prone to breakage. I mean, just on a slight tangent, I put on a record one night a month or so ago, and I was like, this is why I've spent all that time and money and energy acquiring all these various components to make this sound that I'm in right now. And I was listening to my record play. It wasn't my record, it was just a record in my collection, and it was glorious. And I turned on the stereo the following morning, and as soon as I turned it on, the stereo went, and I was like, oh, that doesn't sound good. And it's been broken ever since. It was literally on the next day, heartbroken.
That was all it had to give.
I guess so. Now
Yeah.
I got to get in there.
John, take us into your library at home. Music, are you more of a fiction or nonfiction reader? What are some desert island books and records for you?
Oh man, always so hard. You know, there's different music for different times and moments, and sometimes a song is great, but sometimes like a feeling is great. Um, I think a lot of the records that I love the best would be surprising to people.
Hmm.
Um, because I and in part I think it's because I love the sound of like ensemble play where people are really reacting to one another in the moment. And I love hearing musical personalities expressed. I think that's one of the reasons that I really like both the Beatles and the Stones a
Hmm.
ton, because there's like, oh wow, there's all these like personalities in that group, and it's like you really can feel like you can get into who everybody is when you listen to those records, you know. But I'll tell you, during the pandemic, I was listening to Duke Ellington's Blues in Orbit a ton, which is
Hmm.
this it's his classic band at their full maturity, being super expressive and funny, playing like his beautiful arrangements for that big jazz band. I love that stuff. And the other one that really takes me to a jazz record also that really takes me to a place is A Love Supreme. I mean, I know it's like it's that classic Coltrane thing, but it's just like that's what I want from music. I
Yeah,
want to. I mean, I want to like and feel like the universe is holding me, and
right.
that record really does it for me. It's like that's it's just everything I want, you
Hmm.
know, as
How
well as just like really free expression.
how do you consume music predominantly these days? Through
Well,
vinyl or
these days, it's now that my turntable is now
yeah, right.
it's been tougher. I mean, I listen to every same as everybody else. You know, I've got an Apple Music account, so I've got
Hmm.
basically the universe of all music available to me. And then I don't think anybody would be terribly surprised to hear like most musicians, everybody listens to a lot of music, you know, and I do listen. I consume music,
Hmm.
but if I'm working on music, I tend to be working on I listen to the music that I'm working on to some
Right,
extent, trying to
right.
figure out like what can I do to like bring out more of the types of feelings that I want to get from music in this thing. Like, how can I bring forth the ensemble play? How can I bring forth the love or the expression out of this thing more successfully when I'm producing something? You know what I'm saying?
Right, right. Well, I want to close with a question that I asked Dan as well, John, and that is, we know that there will be new semisonic music, and we're all delighted about that. Is there any possibility for omnivore reissues of Across the Universe in Lulu that way?
What did Dan say?
He said that Universal Records has got them like locked up tight in the vault.
I think there's some question whether they've got them locked up tight in the vault or if they set fire to a
Ah,
couple of years ago. Because I think it's quite possible that we fell victim to that fire.
yeah, right, right. I hope that's not the case.
Yeah, we'll never know.
Right.
In Yeah, it's funny to think about it. I mean, when we made Lulu, um, we Justin Niebank, we wanted to keep everything. So we got a pallet, like a forklift pallet of 2-inch tape. and we recorded a ton. And if all of that music is now been burned up and lost for all time, that's really sad.
It surely is.
And if the masters also got burned up and they were stored in the same place and they didn't have any kind of protocol to kind of store the master, like a copy of the masters in some kind of discrete other space, that's really, I mean, it's tragic folly, you know,
surely is.
And confusing, because it's like, why do you make these copies if you just stick them in the same closet? You know,
absolutely.
What you're doing is trying to, maybe like you're protecting against something like what actually ended up happening to them. I don't know if anyone's going to hold them culpable for any of that stuff. I can't really tell, but I know that a number of people have tried to get a hold of that stuff, and it has been a mighty challenge. And if anybody can do it, I think Cheryl and her partners over at Omnivore would be the ones. But I know at least they've made a preliminary kind of exploration of like how to get a hold of those old Trip Shakespeare records, to re-release them and kind of do some fanfare around them. And I think so far it has not been successful.
Well, we've got a good relationship here with Omnivore from the University of Nebraska, so
I bet you do.
We'll do our part if it's at all possible.
Let them know.
We surely will.
It's good to see you again. I recognize you now.
John, you're so gracious. It's really one of the thrills of my life to be able to speak with you. You're such an icon of mine. I couldn't be more thrilled if I was speaking with McCartney, and I truly mean that. No, Trip Shakespeare has been everything for me, and I will continue to be a follower of your work no matter where it leads. So many, many thanks for joining us here today.
Right on, man. You take care.
Take care. Thank you.
Cheers, people.